Okay, hi there, Year 7. Really well done on all the work you've done so far. I've been able to have a look at all of it and it's really, really good. So you're doing absolutely fantastically from home, so keep it up. Make sure you have a look at the comments I've made on some of your work, just so you can have a look at your targets and like anything that I've said that could be improved. Maybe just make sure that you're focusing on that over the next few lessons so you can really practice that. But overall, I think you're doing really well. This video here is just going to help you with your writing style, because I think that's what we can probably all improve on a little bit, particularly our PEE writing, particularly with the Tudor period. So this is just going to help you with your question about Mary. And the main question is, did she transform the church or did she fail? So by this point, you would have done a lot of these keywords, and you would have started to have a look at this task here. So we're going to have a look at what this is actually asking us, and we're going to go through the structure guide here to figure out what we should be talking about. So I'm just going to bring up the worksheet for the day. So here we go. Let's have a quick look. So the question is asking, did Mary manage to change the church or did she fail? So the question wants you to decide how far you really feel Mary managed to change the church. And this should be, as it already says here, quite comprehensive. So that means it needs to include lots of details to explore the question properly. That means you need to be using quite a bit of evidence. You don't just want to be using one piece of evidence here, because it doesn't make your argument that strong. You want to be using lots of different ones. So let's have a look at the structure guide here. You want to have a clear point or an argument, okay? So you need to really decide, well, did Mary successfully change the church or did she fail? And the way you're going to decide that is based on what you did last lesson on Mary. So you had a look at all the things she did to try and change the church, and you're going to think, well, do I think that she really changed it, or do I think that it wasn't really a very successful change? So you can use this sentence starter here if you want to. I think Mary made a successful or unsuccessful change to the Church of England, and that would be enough to talk about your clear point or arguments. That's all you need to write down. To back up your argument, you need to be including lots of evidence, okay? So you can use the sentence starter here. This is true because, and what you want to be doing is you want to be including a lot of different evidence from the last lesson that you had learned to back up your point. Now it's really important here, you don't just want to be using one bit of evidence, as I've already said. You want to be using at least 3. And to do that, you need to include some connective words like furthermore or in addition or moreover, and they help you to link all of your evidence together. And finally, you want to be explaining what kind of change Mary had made to the church. Now remember, one big thing we're looking at here is some of our key change and continuity language, and we want to be using that. So in this section here, in your explanation, you want to be talking about, well, did she make a full change to the church? Did she make a partial change maybe instead? Was it significant or was it only temporary? Things like this. You really want to be deciding, well, which change best sums up Mary's efforts to the church. And so you want to be using this sentence starter here for your explanation part. This shows that Mary made a, what change? Did she make a temporary change to the English church because, okay, and then you want to be outlining it. Now, there's a challenge here as well, and this is really high level stuff here. If you can decide if Mary made more than one type of change to the church. So, did she make a temporary change and a dramatic change, for example? She might have been able to do both. If you can explain that she did both of those, for example, it could be any of these maybe, but if you can explain she did both of these, then that's a really good explanation. So, I am going to write an answer. I'm not going to write one for Mary because you're going to be doing that, but I'm going to be writing one for Edward. So just to be clear, you want to be answering this question on Mary, but I'm going to do one for Edward just to show you how it works. So let's have a look at how we do this. So we want to start off with our point. oops, I want to start off with our point, and that is here. I think our person made a successful or unsuccessful change. I'm literally just going to copy this and put it here, and obviously because I'm talking about Edward, you're going to be talking about Mary. I'm going to put his name there, and I actually think that Edward made a successful change to the church. So this is going to be my opening line. Okay, so I've done my point, easy. Now I want to be including some evidence. So I want to now be thinking about part 2 here. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the sentence starter here. This is true because. So this is true because. Now, in fact, before I started writing this, I should have probably thought about a little plan. So I'm just going to do that down here. What am I going to be talking about for Edward? Well, there's things that he introduced, like the Common Prayer Book. So I want to be talking about that. That's where he made sure the book was in English for everybody. I'm also going to be talking about the fact that in 1549, priests could marry. Now that was a very big change compared to his father, so we'll put that in there. And the fact he made that churches were plain. And maybe we could talk about something about how he put down the prayer book rebellion. That's quite significant because that shows that a lot of people were really against this really, really strong change, but he'd put it down. So it will work in our paragraph as we go along. Okay, so let's start to write this. This is true because let's talk about the prayer book, Common Prayer Book first. So I'm going to say Edward introduced the Common Prayer Book. Meaning that all Bibles were in English for the first time in England. Okay, so that's a successful change we've talked about. Okay, I'm going to elaborate just a little bit more on this. What the best answers will do here, because we're talking about change and continuity, we want to really compare some of the evidence to what had come before. So if I can explain that this was a very big change compared to Henry, then that would be a really good answer because I've shown that this massive change had happened. So I'm going to now talk about how that compares with Henry. So this was a major change compared to Henry VIII, because this was the first time that all Bibles were in English. Brilliant. Now remember, we want to be using our connective words and we want to be adding in some more evidence. So I'm going to put furthermore. That's a lovely connective. I'm going to say that churches in England, actually churches should be a lower c, in England were stripped of their decorations and were made plain for the very first time. And again, I'm going to be comparing it to Henry before him and the Catholic Church before that as well. So I'm going to say, unlike Henry's church or Catholic Church, Edward's church was radical. That's a really nice word because that's one of our key words that we were talking about, like a radical change. Was radical because it was the first time that I'm just going to say churches in England did not have decorations in them, meaning that this was a strong move towards a Protestant church. And now I think maybe we could just talk about one more piece of evidence. So let's talk about the fact that in 1549 priests could marry as well. So I'm going to put in addition to this, in 1549, Edward allowed priests in England to marry. Once more, this was a huge, or I'm going to say this was a significant change to what had come before, because this was the first time priests were allowed to marry. Right, brilliant. Okay, so we've done all of our evidence there, and now we just want to be doing this explanation. Now remember that we want to be talking about a type of change. So what do I think? And I'm going to do the challenge as well. I'm going to think about two different types of changes that he had made. Well, I'm going to call this a dramatic change, and I'm going to call it dramatic change because Edward changed things very radically in a very, very short space of time. So I'm going to call it dramatic. So I'm going to use this. So I'm going to say this shows that. Maybe I'm going to start on a new line here. This shows that Edward made a dramatic change to the Church of England. Now I'm going to, and I need to say because, okay? This is because his changes happened within a matter of years. Because remember, he was only on the throne for 6 years, and they were incredibly different to what Henry had instated before him. Okay, so what we're showing there is that, this is a really dramatic change. It happened very, very quickly, and it was very different to what Henry had done. So that's really important here. Now let's think about this as well. Remember, we can use another connective. In addition to this, I also think this shows that Edward made a... Well, what other change could I say that he made here? I'm going to say immediate change, I think. That's probably a nice one as well, talking about the... Well, I guess we've already kind of discussed how quickly it was. I think we could get away with saying full change, actually. Because if you think Edward had changed everything completely compared to the Catholic Church. So let's do a full change. I also think this shows that Edward made a full change to the Church of England. And what I'm going to say is and I'm going to say this is because by the end of his reign, the Church of England looked and acted extremely differently to the Catholic Church that many English people were familiar with only 30 years ago. And I think that is a really, really lovely paragraph. So let me just highlight where the point was. So this was the point. I'm going to do that in red. This is all of the evidence. Okay, that's all the evidence. I'll do that in blue. And I'll do all of the explanation, I think, in orange. Maybe not in orange, you can't really see that, can you? Let's do that one in purple. Okay, so let's read this back to you then. I think Edward made a successful change to the Church of England. This is true because Edward introduced the Common Prayer Book, meaning that all Bibles were in English for the first time in England. This was a major change compared to Henry VIII because this was the first time that all Bibles were in English. Furthermore, churches in England were stripped of their decorations and were made plain for the very first time. Unlike Henry's church or the Catholic Church, Edward's church was radical. I've just realised that should be a capital C. Church was radical because it was the first time that churches in England did not have decorations in them, meaning that this was a strong move towards the Protestant church. In addition to this, in 1549, Edward allowed priests in England to marry. Once more, this was a significant change to what had come before because this was the first time priests were allowed to marry. Can you see how all the time there I'm really linking it back to what had come before to show the change, okay? Now here, this shows that Edward made a dramatic change to the Church of England. This is because his changes happened within a matter of years and they're incredibly different to what Henry had instated before him. In addition to this, I also think this shows that Edward made a full change to the Church of England. This is because by the end of his reign, the Church of England looked and acted extremely differently to the Catholic Church that many English people, I guess I should write there, people were familiar with only 30 years ago. And that's all you need to do. So what you need to do now is create your own one for Mary. So good luck with that. Please let me know if you have any questions and I will speak to you soon. Take care.